Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you my round 2 game from the Sesvete Open. I got paired against my former coach, international master Biti, who's a great player, a great guy, a ton of experience, and knows everything I do well and everything I do poorly, and knows my repertoire. So this was a tough pairing for me. It's never easy to get paired against somebody who knows you well. Sun Tzu would be upset. Okay, so he has been playing e4 all his life, and needless to say, I was preparing for e4 for a long time. I spent probably 8 hours preparing altogether, and then he played knight f3. Now, I'm not going to say what I would have played against e4, but it wouldn't have been the Caro-Kann. Let me just say that. Okay, I was surprised to see knight f3, and I didn't have any prep against this, so I just played what I usually play. I didn't know whether he was going to go for the English, the Queen's Gambit, the London, the King's Indian attack, the Reti, the Catalan. This could be a million different openings. He played pawn to g3, and it's still unclear what it's going to be. Knight f6, bishop g2, c6. And castles, and this position is the King's Indian attack already. Now he's gonna go d3 and play for e4, and in this position black has two main moves, bishop g4 and bishop f5. I played bishop f5 because I like that better. Of course, bishop g4 plays against e4, but I like allowing e4. I like those positions and I have a lot of experience with them. So d3, e6, and in this position knight h4 isn't really a good move because of bishop h4, h3 and bishop h5, and if g4 is played, then knight f to d7, and black probably has a slight advantage. The engine says this is equal, but I like black's position. White has to go knight back to f3, and then after bishop g6, it's not really clear why white created all of these weaknesses. So the main move here is knight bd2, of course, preparing e4. Also c4 can be played. He played knight f to d2. Before we continue with the game against my coach, I would like to thank Chessbook, who are sponsoring today's video. Chessbook is an excellent tool for building, learning, understanding and practicing your repertoire. It works very simply, it's easy to navigate, and it's easy to understand. What you can do with Chessbook is you can import and practice your repertoire. You can learn from the mistakes you made in your online games, and it's easy to do. So you can import your repertoire by hand or by importing a PGN. So let's say I want to go to my black repertoire. So let's see what my repertoire should be against the thing that Ozren played. So knight f3, d5, I'm definitely going to stick to this. So g3, knight f6, bishop to g2, c6, I'm sorry, castles, bishop to f5, d3, h6, or e6 first. I played e6, knight f to d2, and h6. Okay, let's keep adding moves. e4, bishop h7. Now, with a basic version of Chessbook, you get about 200 moves you can import, but if you get the premium membership, you get unlimited moves. Okay, so against bishop h7, there are a couple of moves. Knight c3 is probably the most sensible, bishop to e7. And let's save the moves to my repertoire. So now I can practice these moves. So let's say practice d5, knight f6, c6, bishop f5, e6, h6, bishop to h7, knight c3, bishop e7. Okay, so you can do that. Or you can go to your repertoire, say import, take a PGN file and import a PGN. And once you get a PGN, you can practice these moves immediately. Another thing you can do is you can connect your Lichess and chess.com accounts and review the mistakes in the games you'd made. Another feature that I've added recently is playing through a model game. So in this case, I was given a game Vogel-Burmakin, and it's a game from my repertoire. I can go through the game, guess what the grandmasters played, and try to improve my play this way. Once more, I'd like to say Chessbook is a tool I've actually been using ever since we started cooperating. It's useful. I use it to prepare for this tournament. Milan and I were sitting on my balcony and practicing, I don't want to say which opening, using chessbook, and I was getting quizzed and kept making mistakes 15 moves down until I got it all right. So it's useful, and I think you'll like it. Check out the free version. There's a link in the description, and let me know what you think. Thanks very much. Knight f to d2 is fine, although it delays the development of the other knight, but it opens up the bishop, so it's triple control over e4 with one move. h6 is forced because I need a square for my bishop, and e4 and bishop h7. And I've played this probably over 100 times when you combine training games and online games. I know this position pretty well. I should say that e5 is a move white never really wants to make. And I've won many games with the e5 here. Not that black is winning, but the position is extremely comfortable. After knight fd7, c5, knight c6. And you're going to get an improved French, or basically a Caro-Kann, where white doesn't really have c4, doesn't really have d4. f4, f5 is a bit slow because of my bishop on h7, and black's pieces are all very comfortably placed. So e5 gives away the center. So he played knight c3, which is understandable. I played bishop e7. This is still theory. f4 is theory, castles is theory, and g4 is still theory. And I knew this position. And I knew that d4 was the main move. And or not the main move in this position, but I knew that it was an idea, the main idea. So after d4, d4, knight a6 is a setup I was familiar with, where I can start putting pressure on the c2 pawn, and a3 is probably the best option, but now b5 comes, and this is something like that. I could have done something like that, and I remembered this, and I was expecting a3 in this position. But I played a5, which isn't a bad move. However, it's a bad move if what happens in the game happens, and that's e5. Now e5 is a mistake. It should not be the best move. White should play king h1 or queen e2 or a3 or continue developing, but he played e5, and now after knight d7, of course c5 is less strong than it used to be because my pawn is on a5, because I give away the b5 square. I can no longer challenge the b5 square. But still, e5 was a small inaccuracy, and black should now be better. Not by a large margin, but black is slightly better. This pawn storm g4, f4 isn't really scary because g5 doesn't work and f5 doesn't work. So the king is weak, but there's no apparent reason. Okay, here I continued with c5, of course. I want to show you a weird engine idea, which I saw after I finished the analysis of this game. I didn't see it, I turned on the engine and then I saw it. The engine plays a4, and then after, let's say, queen e1, the engine plays a3, gives up this pawn, or not, doesn't give up the pawn, plays bishop a3, and this should be the best line for black. That's understandable, but if in this position white just ignores me and goes, for example, king h1, then a b2, bishop b2, I couldn't see why I would do this. And apparently this is better than the game continuation. I played c5, which is fine. He played knight e2, I played knight c6, and again, black has a slight advantage. I was aware that this should be about equal. I wasn't sure about the insertion of a5 and whether that is too detrimental to my position. But I knew the plans. That was important. I knew that my position was okay. Now, I came up with a plan here. He played knight g3, and I came up with a plan to push c4. And this bishop is often a bad piece when white hasn't played c4. When the pawn is still on c2, you usually target this structure by breaking through with c4. So my idea was something like knight b4, queen b6, one rook to d8, and then c4. So I played queen b6 first, and this is a tempo move basically, because he has to move the king. I don't think bishop e3 is a viable option. Well, maybe it is. I think I can go d4 and maybe I can even take on b2 and on a2. It's just a pawn up, and maybe. Okay, so let's see. So rook b1, queen a2. If he takes on b7, then probably rook a7 is okay. I just defend everything and I'm a pawn up. I don't know if that's good enough. Maybe my queen is misplaced, but probably he cannot go bishop e3. So he has to go king h1. Okay, now I went rook fd8, and this is basically another tempo move because I want to go c4 and knight e5. And he has to move the queen, so he played queen e2. And now c4. And this is a pawn sacrifice that cannot be taken. I'm breaking through. And if he doesn't take, I mean, he has to take once, but if he plays something like bishop e3, then I just push d4, and I take once, and I go knight b4, and that should be the end of the game, unless he wishes to give up the bishop. And if he does give up the bishop, then my position is very good. Once again, I'm going to play knight c5 next move. And the only question is whether I take with the a-pawn, with the bishop, or with the queen. I'm not sure. I also have the d5 square for my knight, so maybe queen takes, followed by knight b6, knight d5. Okay, so against c4, he takes once, I took back, and now if queen takes, of course, knight b4, and this actually is winning for black because there is no defense to the rook. For example, if, let's find a move, it's tough to find a move, let's say f5, trying to block this here, then I go rook ac8, he moves the queen, I take with the knight. Or if he doesn't play f5, if he plays, let's say knight e1 defending, then again rook ac8. The most obvious example is what if c3, then I just go bishop d3. If a3, then this is simple again, knight c2. If rook a2, then rook ac8, and after queen e2, queen b3 picks up the rook. So for example, rook ac8, queen e2, queen b3, and that's it. So basically he cannot take. He played f5. And now I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to trade off the knights because I didn't like my knight. And I wanted to keep putting pressure on b2, so I played the move knight d4. He took, I took with the queen. And if he plays rook d1, I just take on e5, so the pawn is hanging. He has to take on b7. So takes on b7, rook b8, the bishop dropped back, and now I took on e5. And this required a lot of calculation because there are too many moves that seemingly trap my queen. There's c3, there's bishop e3, there's bishop f4, double pressure on the knight. I had to calculate all of them. If he plays bishop e3, that's really not such a good move. I can take on g4. If he plays bishop f4, putting pressure on the knight, then I can go f6 and or even bishop f6. And after f e6, I go rook b2. This also seemed fine. But the most worrying move was c3. And I played queen c5. And now the problem is knight e4 is coming. And my knight is going to get double attacked. So bishop f4. And in this position, I made my first mistake. I played bishop f6. I should have gone f6 again. And the point is, if pawn takes, then I have bishop d3. So the pawn cannot be taken. Other than that, if bishop takes, then that's fine. I just play queen e5. And if the queens get traded off, this pawn is going to hang. If queen c4, then again, this pawn is going to hang. Instead, I played bishop f6, which is a big advantage to white. After knight e4, it's about +1. Queen b5 is forced, and in this position, he played knight f6, gf6, and rook ab1. Okay, and all of that is about +1. And I played king g7. I want to save my pawn. Now, this required a lot of calculation. I should say that my opponent had about 5 minutes on the clock at this point, and I had more than half an hour. It was a very complicated position. And I was calculating king g7, queen e3, knight takes g4, and figured that was better for me, which is true. He didn't see it. I should mention that the engine plays a4 here and says that king g7 is a mistake, white is +1.5, but not with queen e3. And queen e3 is a very tempting move. The engine plays a4, misplacing the queen, or h3, which I don't understand, or bishop e4, which I do understand. The most tempting queen e3 fails to knight g4, even though you seemingly lose a piece. This is how the game went. Queen g3 and the knight is pinned to the king. But after bishop f5, black is better. And h3, winning the knight. Now, you have two options here with black. You can pause the video and try to figure out the correct continuation. In this position, I played a bad move. It's not too bad. I played rook to d3, and I'm not losing immediately, but it's a slight advantage to white, once again, then very hard to play for black. After queen to h4, now I played the losing move. I played knight e5, saving my piece, and I saw that there is no checkmate. But I'd missed a Zwischenzug for white that wins the game and allows a checkmate or loses my rook. So I played knight e5. And the point is, after queen h6, king g8, queen f6, which is forced. Now I go knight g6, defending the e5 square so that there is no mate here. And if bishop h6, again, queen e5, and there is no mate, and I'm just up material, this is how the game went, and he actually took on b8, allowing me to equalize. Had he inserted a4, I would have resigned, and I saw it after I played knight g6. The point is, my queen has to either undefend the e5 square or undefend the rook. So if I keep defending e5 with queen c5, then bishop b8 is a free rook. If I keep defending my rook, then bishop h6 is checkmate. And that's it. I don't have any other options. So coming back to this position, after queen h4, I had one move to save the game, and that was rook h3, which I didn't even look at. And after bishop h3, there's bishop e4, bishop g2, king g2, and rook g8. And this is slightly better for white, but not such a big deal. After queen g4, king h8, this should be a better position for white, of course, two rooks and the bishop versus a queen, but I have a bunch of pawns, and the engine could draw this. Now, coming back to h3, I played rook d3, which, best case, if I sack my rook on h3, is close to equal. An advantage for black would have been bishop takes b1, which I did look at, but I'd concluded that knight e5 was better. Rook takes b1, and now the point is queen f5, attacking the rook, so this knight has to be taken, now has to be taken with check. Queen g4, ag4, and now e5. And I have two rooks for, I have a rook for two bishops, and I have a pawn, or sorry, I have two pawns. So this, of course, against an IM would have been extremely hard to convert. Probably the game would have ended in a draw, but he was playing on increment. At this point, he had 30 seconds on the clock. So, you know, anything could have happened. But back to the game. I played rook d3. He played queen h4. I played knight e5. He took on h6, took on f6, knight g6, and then took on b8. And now my position is excellent. It's not winning. It should be about equal. But the fact that he'd given up the bishop for the exchange is huge for me. Because I have rook g3, I have queen g3, I have bishop h3, I have knight h4, I have knight f4 in many positions. This is an excellent attacking position, and my king is perfectly safe. And here he blundered. He should have taken rook f5, given the exchange back, and after ef5, queen f5, something like queen g3 should be equal. He is a pawn ahead, but my position is very active, and once again, I have all of these moves coming in. He's going to have to trade queens, and most likely it's going to end in a draw. But he blundered with queen g5. And now I had about 20 minutes on the clock, and I played quickly, which isn't to say that I played poorly. I actually played the best moves, but I was trying to put him under pressure because he had 30 seconds on the clock. I played rook g3, which is of course the correct move. He played queen d2, which is the only move, and now I was trying to figure out bishop takes h3, but it doesn't work. So if I play bishop takes h3, then probably rook f2 is good enough, and I have to retreat my bishop. Okay. The alternative to this was knight h4, which is the best move. And now white has only one move to save the game. Rook f2 fails to bishop b1. So does rook g1. So you cannot defend the bishop. If you move the bishop, I take on h3 and it's going to be checkmate. And also you don't really have a square for the bishop. If you play bishop c6, then rook h3 is just going to be mate. After king g1, queen g3 check. Queen g2 is the only move, and then, you know, knight takes g2, bishop g2, and we can go rook h2. And after this, we have this. So he has to play queen f4. Has to save checkmate. I have to take because my queen is hanging and my rook is hanging. Takes. And now the crucial moment. I'd calculated the endgame and figured it was winning. There are two endgames. One of them I didn't even consider, unfortunately. When we were driving back from the tournament hall, we were analyzing without the board, Milan and I said, okay, maybe I should take bishop b1? Is that good? And when I went deeper through the line, I'd concluded that it was an easier endgame. So this was the alternative, which I didn't consider during the game. The reason was I'd just assumed that what I did was completely winning, and it was hard to see that it wasn't. So if bishop b1, then rook h4 is forced, and now I take. And white really... well, I should say that after I'd finished analyzing this, I turned on the engine, and the engine says that rook g4 is the only move that gives white some hope. So after this, takes, white should have some hope, but not a lot. This should be about minus 0.5 to minus 1, depending on what happens. And of course, in a rook endgame with an extra pawn, that's very tough to win. In an endgame where we both have light squared bishops, that's much easier, especially considering that this pawn is on a dark square and that I have a protected passed pawn. And this one is on a light square, so imagine my king on g5, my bishop, let's say, on e2. His pieces are going to have to be committed, and then I just push my pawn. He had 30 seconds on the clock. He could have blundered this away. But I played the most tempting continuation, knight takes bishop. And I saw that he wins the piece back. But I win a pawn and I have a very active rook, so this is forced. Rook takes f5, e takes f5, and rook g1 winning the knight. If I move my rook, he just wins the knight, so I may as well take a pawn. If I move my knight, I lose my rook, so rook takes h3. King takes is forced, and rook d3. And I thought this was a winning endgame. It's not a winning endgame. And I was stressed. That's not a defense. I probably would have misevaluated this even if I was completely calm, because I'm not good enough at endgames to understand this before I take on g2. But it just seemed very promising. The problem, if my king was on f8, then it would have been completely winning. For example, I don't know how to lose a tempo, but let's lose a tempo like this. So if we had this position with white to play, then white would have to go king f1, rook f1, and after this, I mean, can I trade rooks? Yes, I can. Yeah, I just trade rooks, and this is a winning king and pawn endgame. I just march my king over here, play the move a3, and that's it. This is wait, is this winning? I actually didn't analyze this, but I was thinking, I don't know, maybe it's not winning because the king is within the square of the f pawn. So he plays king e3 and king d4, picks up this pawn and is in time to catch the f pawn. Maybe it's not winning. It's not winning. Okay, I don't want to, if you want to analyze this on your own, do it. I don't want to ruin it for myself by turning on the engine. Let me show you what happened in the game. It's a moot point anyway. My king was on g8. So he plays king f2, I play king f8, he plays king e2, preventing rook d2. And I played king e7, he played rook f1, and then I saw it. He's going to do this. And yeah, this is just a draw. I played rook h3, he played rook f4. I played king e6, he took the pawn on c4. I took the pawn on b2 and offered a draw, and he of course accepted. There's no way to win this position. It's just the fact that I have an extra pawn here is irrelevant. You can pretend that I don't have it, then it's an easy draw. I don't know what he would have done here. The engine agrees it's just equal. So rook a4 is probably logical. Rook b5 is forced. I don't know what he does here, but I don't know. Rook c4. that there is no way to win this. So I have to say I was upset that I didn't manage to win, but only briefly, because I'd assumed that my position was so winning that I couldn't mess it up, but I'd misassessed the endgame. I'm sorry, and I want to apologize to Ozren that he didn't beat me when he had a chance. Had he had more time on the clock, he would have found a4 straight away and beaten me handily. That doesn't mean that I played a poor game. I think I played well, but he outplayed me with an attack, and then in time trouble, he made a mistake, allowed me to get back into the game. In any case, it was interesting, and I'm glad I've managed to survive against my coach. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more chess. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.